Welcome to Zoom In, Zoom Out, your global look at news from Taiwan. I'm Jaime Ocon. It's an interesting time for U.S. Taiwan relations, with current President Donald Trump slamming Taiwan for not spending enough on its defense. That's despite Taiwan spending the most on U.S. weapons under Trump's first term than ever before in Taiwan's history. Today, we're going to discuss U.S. policy towards Taiwan and how the two countries can cooperate more under threats from neighboring China. Joining me today is Bonnie Glaser. She's the Managing Director of the Indo-Pacific Program at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. Bonnie Glaser, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start off with asking about the current state of U.S.-Taiwan relations. Are Taipei and Washington the closest that they've ever been?
Well, I certainly think that the U.S.-Taiwan relationship is very strong. It has really been moving from strength to strength. There is so much that binds our two societies, our peoples, our countries together. And concern about China's pressure on Taiwan is one of them. Our economic relationship is extremely strong. And I think that we do face some uncertainty going forward. We do have a new president in Washington. I think it's not completely clear yet how President Trump will be approaching Taiwan. But you know, Taiwan is not alone, because every country in the world is facing some unpredictability with Trump and pressure. And so I think that there's no reason to believe that the relationship will not remain strong going forward. But there will be demands, I think, from President Trump, and there will be a little bit of adjustments. We've already seen President Trump put pressure on Canada, on Mexico, on Denmark, because President Trump wants to acquire Greenland. So Taiwan is not alone.
I want to talk about that pressure. In your conversations with people either in government or observers in the field, do you see that pressure as a form of, I want to say, like galvanizing other countries to work more closely together just because of the concern that the United States is a little more unstable today?
I certainly see that's a trend in Europe, where there is a perception that working together as European countries is going to be important going forward, and the PRC has tried to divide Europe and divide U.S. from its allies really all over the world. I do think that there's a lot of desire in many countries around the world to support Taiwan. We've seen this tendency among democratic countries for the last several years. I definitely think that will continue, and I hope that if the United States is not quite in the lead, maybe it will be in the middle, but I hope other countries will pick up the slack. The United States is talking a little bit less about democracy, for example, and values, but of course there are many other countries in the world for whom that is still very important.
I wanted to ask you, when people ask and people kind of try to pressure Taiwan to get to a certain numeric level, where it's 3%, other people outside of government had said 5%, you get to the levels of 10%. Why is, first of all, 3% of GDP so important, and what's that signal that Taiwan is trying to send to Washington?
Well, I think that Taiwan is responding to an expectation in the United States, which is not new under the Trump administration, that Taiwan spend more on its defense. And we know that most presidents of Taiwan going back many years have set a target of spending 3% of GDP on its defense. But nobody has really achieved that goal. We've seen significant change. I believe that when Tsai Ing-wen took power, it was about 2.1%, and now is 2.5%, close to 2.6%. And the question is, of course, is that the best way to measure Taiwan's commitment to its defense? And of course, there are many different ways that are important, not just that. When it comes to the figure, what I like to look at is the percentage of the government budget that is allocated to defense. I'm told that that is now 15%. That is an important figure. I think for some time it was about 11 or 12%. So to me, that shows that how Taiwan is allocating its spending. It's really allocating more of a percentage to defense, even as the economy grows. But then, of course, there's other indicators that it's important. It's the training and the weapons, the reserves, the conscripts, the way that the defense spending is being used is also extremely important.
And I imagine that when Taiwan is at the negotiating table with U.S. officials, that 15% sounds much better than 3%. To Trump, that number might be well welcomed. And I do want to talk a little bit about the other side that you just mentioned in your answer about it's not just a numerical value that we're looking at. In your opinion, what would be something that you would identify that, okay, this is it, this is Taiwan being serious, this is something that, whether it's a whole of society approach or civil defense, what's maybe something that you hope that Taiwan can change for defense reform?
Well, there's a lot, of course, already going on in defense reform. I think the whole of society defense resilience plan is extremely important. So getting the society ready and more aware, which begins, of course, with natural disasters. And Taiwan, of course, already has that kind of experience, but extending it to being prepared to defend their communities, their families, if that is necessary. And I think that Taiwan's in a sort of nascent phase of doing that. There's been a lot of work that's been done by Lai Ching-te's administration over the last year, talking more publicly with people about the threat, helping them to understand that and what they can do in the event of any kind of crisis, I think is extremely important. Of course, the military itself, I think the reserves really need a lot of work. Taiwan has something like 1.6 million people, I think, that are in the reserves, but the training there really needs to be brought up to a much higher level so that if reserves are called up, that they can actually defend the country. Training, I think, is almost just really beginning to become more realistic. For so long, training here was just, shall we say, performative. We knew in advance what the outcome of some exercise was going to be, but that's changing as well. So I think the trajectory is absolutely right. The only question is the pace. And for that, we need, I think, more support from the outside world, more commitment from all the parts of the society, and that means bipartisan cooperation.
From the United States?
No, here in Taiwan. And that is one of the biggest problems here. Everybody needs to understand that if there is one thing that the whole country should agree on, it is the defense of Taiwan. And I think that of all the years that I've been watching politics in Taiwan, I've never seen it so toxic and so dysfunctional as I have on this visit.
Whether it's the public displays of aggression in the legislative sessions or agreements or disagreements on defense spending, whether it's the submarine or conscription, when it comes to, like you mentioned about the first step of having both sides agree and then engage with the United States, how big is that obstacle of both the KMT and the DPP not agreeing in order to see the common good, which is the defense of the country?
When I met with the delegation from Taiwan that attended the Trump inauguration, and the day after the inauguration, they all met with members of Congress. I believe they met with 24 members of Congress. It was like speed dating. They each had like 15 minutes. And I heard from the delegation members that every member they met with was concerned about defense spending and the budget here. But of course it goes way beyond defense spending because the freezes, the cuts are affecting many different aspects of your government and society. And I think the United States is quite concerned about that. We certainly have polarization in my country, in our political system, but I have to tell you, there are issues in which there is some bipartisan consensus and agreement. And I think that Taiwan really needs to figure out how it can, the steps it can take to best defend the country, to ensure that the foreign ministry is doing its job, the defense ministry, the Ministry of Interior that's doing part of this whole of society defense resilience. It seems to me that right now this is a pivotal moment. And if if the budget is not approved and the society is not able to move forward in a positive direction, then I worry that this is something that will create more weaknesses and vulnerabilities in Taiwan that Beijing can take advantage of.
Well, let's say the average Taiwanese person here, if the military or the government start instituting more close defense reform, more public displays of, hey, this potentially could happen, do you think Taiwan's public is ready for that?
Here, it's very difficult to judge, but I do think that there is an effort, as I said, to work with like some of these civil society organizations that are trying to raise awareness about civil defense. The Whole Society Defense Program is now including them. And of course, Taiwan is very strong, I think, in fighting disinformation, misinformation. This is, and your cyber security, I think, is improving, but also has a long way to go. There really does need to be greater awareness about the broad range of threats that Taiwan faces. So it's not just about this thin slice of the military threat. It is the many, many threats that threaten the well-being of and unity of Taiwan.
You recently wrote, all eyes potentially could be on this meeting that Trump wants to have with Xi Jinping within his first 100 days. And in the op-ed, you write that, moreover, when seeking a deal or some sort of agreement to cooperate more, says Mr. Trump should not agree to limit arms sales to Taiwan or endorse Beijing's objective of reunifying Taiwan with China. I want to pick this sentence out because when we talked about chips, bargaining chips, do you think Taiwan is any at all concerned that it could find itself in the middle as a bargaining piece when it comes to cooperation between the United States and China?
Well, I certainly hope not. I advocate against using Taiwan as any kind of a bargaining chip. I don't rule out the possibility that Xi Jinping would pose some asks to President Trump. When Xi Jinping met with President Biden last time in San Francisco, apparently he did ask President Biden if he would agree to say that the United States supports peaceful reunification. And President Biden did not do that. I would not be surprised if that ask were posed to President Trump. Of course, I hope that President Trump would never agree to that. The United States has long believed that the most important aspect of relations between China and Taiwan is process, not outcome. So we insist that the differences be resolved peacefully. We don't take a position on what the end state should be. So we certainly shouldn't say that we would support Xi Jinping's goal of peaceful reunification, but I think that is something that Beijing wants. And then, of course, there could be further asks like stopping arms sales to Taiwan, which I think would be a very, very detrimental thing to do. President Trump has already talked about how he wants to meet with Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping together, and he wants all three countries to cut defense spending by 50%. I think that this is a very dangerous road to begin to walk down, because I don't know how you hold Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping to such a commitment. There wouldn't be, I think, verification as to whether or how they were cutting defense spending. And then Trump also had an idea of denuclearization agreement. This is, to me, very, very risky. And so I do worry about how Xi Jinping could introduce Taiwan into such a conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's show.
Thank you for having me.
For more content from TaiwanPlus, you can visit our website or check us out on social media. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.